So, I finally had the chance to play Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain. Now, if you're familiar with the Metal Gear series, you'll know that it's highly advised before playing Phantom Pain that you play Ground Zeroes, which I did. And while it did enhance the experience, if you don't want to spend the money, I'd recommend just watching a YouTube video on it. But onto the titular game in question, is Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain worth it in 2025? My short answer is yes, but if you'd like to know a bit more about the game and hear why, I'd recommend you keep watching. Leading into my playthrough of Phantom Pain, I didn't really know what to expect. I knew the game was about stealth and had some sort of commentary on war. And there's two things with that for me. One, I love stealth-based games. Assassin's Creed is probably one of my favorite IPs in gaming, and a few of them take up some spots in my top 5 and top 10 games. And number two, I love anti-war media. Now, of course, this is a spoiler for your review, but the game doesn't just stop at a war in the Middle East or even the South African apartheid and Angolan civil war. The game has a few fantastical elements. So, while I was walking in expecting an anti-war stealth Call of Duty, I walked out experiencing an incredibly unique IP that knows exactly what it wants to be by Hideo Kojima. Enough about the story elements. How does it play as a game? One thing I look for in games with a lot of free roam is the customization, and the Phantom Pain does not disappoint. There is a ton of customization and personality you can add to not only your looks, but your gameplay. Phantom Pain emphasizes stealth, but you can kind of play it any way you want. You could walk in with missile launchers, call in artillery strikes, throw a ton of smoke bombs, and run from takedown to takedown, etc. So I like stealth, despite not being the best at it, and the Phantom Pain stealth mechanics are incredibly developed. For me, a lot of the times going full stealth was difficult, but it wasn't really frustrating. When I would get caught, rarely would it be because of the game being unfair. It would usually be my fault for getting too antsy or taking a risk I didn't need to take. With that being said, there are a couple missions in the Phantom Pain that I hated so much, and they usually involved blowing up tanks with like missile launchers or C4, things like that, because it felt way too out of the norm for what it's supposed to be. If Metal Gear Solid 5 is supposed to have a bunch of stealth and you have these takedowns, having these missions where you're out in the open blowing up a bunch of tanks just felt super divisive for me. And those were probably my least. There was only a couple of them, but they were definitely my least favorite missions in the game. But with that being said, the gameplay loop is pretty damn diverse. Paired with the variety of locations and loadouts, it doesn't feel that repetitive. And if you really do need something fresh, you can always change up your style and approach things differently. Switching gears a little bit, because we're talking about the development and complexity of the game, the mother base, which is kind of like your home base, did feel a little lackluster and empty. I was hoping there was more interaction between me and the troops on the base, but it kind of just stops at them saluting or me punching them. However, this doesn't really take me out of the game at all, since most of the game takes place on various missions in Afghanistan and Africa. Alongside the gameplay loop, I usually like to look at progression, and while it's a little confusing at first, the progression is also very extensive. You can progress the mother base to make it bigger and hire more goons, and you can also develop items for your buddies who are a companion that you deploy with, your own gear, or even the support helicopter. These developments play into the gameplay loop, as you can develop items specific to how you want to play, or be a jack of all trades and get a bunch of different tools and utilities. However, my critique of this mechanic is that it felt really slow. I ended up just getting a mod that made all the enemies A+ and S+ rank to speed up this process, because I kind of just wanted to get to the gameplay and not have to grind development levels to unlock better equipment. Very quickly, before we get into the end here, as you've been seeing in the background, the game looks very good and plays incredibly smooth, and I believe it holds up to today's standards even a decade later. And it's also not that intensive on my computer. I have a pretty decent computer, but the game runs very well at high settings, and I would assume that it would run very well at low settings as well. With all that being said, is Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain worth it in 2025? I absolutely think so, and I would recommend it to anyone, to be honest, for a very solid experience. The game does a great job at being immersive and developing the majority of the mechanics it introduces. For me on Steam, it's priced at around $20 when it's not on sale, which I'd already say is pretty decent value. But if you could pick it up on sale like I did, you would definitely be getting your money's worth.